We often hear this phrase, dad's little princess. Sometimes it is said with affection, sometimes with mockery. But very rarely do we pause and ask, what does this kind of closeness actually shape in a person's life? Hi, I am Mahalakshmi Samson. In my work and even in people around me, I have noticed something very subtle. And you know what? Sometimes a person can carry a child's beliefs with an adult's responsibilities. From the outside, they may look very mature, but actually, inside, their decisions still would depend on someone else's voice. And here I would like to talk about somebody called Ananya. And Ananya is someone whom we can always find around us. She was one of those daughters many of us know. She is actually a dad's little princess. She was deeply connected to her father, not just emotionally close. His opinion made her feel safe. His approval made her feel certain. Before making even small decisions, she would always instinctively check with him first. And nobody really questioned it because from the outside it looked like love, it looked like respect, it looked like attachment, and it is honestly. But slowly, if you see, something else was also happening underneath. Ananya became very good at listening to other people, not very connected to her own voice. And because one voice had become so much strong, and it had such an emotional reference point for her, it became difficult to fully trust perspectives that felt different from that voice. So, even when someone else genuinely cared for her, if they thought differently, if they felt differently, or approached life differently, she struggled to fully receive them emotionally. Not because she did not love them, but because somewhere inside, safety had become, attached to one familiar voice. She could handle responsibilities, she could handle work and life, but when it came to decisions, she felt more certain when someone else approved her first. And then she got married. One day, she and her husband were discussing about buying a bike. Almost automatically, she called her father first. A few minutes later, she came back and said, Appa feels we should wait. And her husband was taken aback. He paused for a moment and quietly asked, What do you feel, Ananya? And that question stayed with her because somewhere underneath she realized she didn't really know what she felt about this or anything. This is where many people misunderstand the issue. The problem is not love. The problem begins when one voice becomes so strong in a relationship that the other person slowly loses space to even develop their own voice. And somewhere along the way, that's exactly what happened to Ananya also. Every time she looked for certainty, the voice that immediately came alive inside her was her father's. And slowly, you know what happened? She stopped asking, What do I feel? And in relationships like marriage, a partner is not only looking for the right decision, the partner is also looking for emotional participation, a shared voice, a person who is emotionally present in the relationship, because a relationship cannot grow fully if one voice is always standing behind another. And this is not only about fathers and daughters, it can happen between mothers and sons, mothers and daughters, or any deeply dependent emotional relationship. So, this is not about gender, it is about emotional boundaries. If any part of this feels familiar, just pause for a moment and notice what it brings up in you. Because many people live these patterns without ever having words for them. So, what can we do? If somewhere inside we are someone like Ananya and want to slowly reclaim our identity while still holding our relationship with love and respect, then maybe we begin with 3 small shifts. The first one I would recommend is notice what happens inside you. Next time you feel the need to ask someone before deciding, pause for a moment and notice what happens inside you before you ask. Maybe clarity, maybe it is confusion, maybe it's fear or anxiety. But what is important here is that awareness matters, because sometimes it is not the decision that we are afraid of. It is the emotional consequences we have learned to expect. And if asking still feels necessary right now, that's okay. You do not have to force change immediately. Just begin by noticing yourself. The second shift I would want to tell you is build your voice in small places. Individuality does not suddenly appear in bigger moments. It develops slowly through very small choices. What you prefer, what you enjoy, what you actually feel, not what keeps everyone comfortable. And while doing this, you may notice hesitation, a pull to check with someone else, and that's okay too. Because you are not just learning to make decisions, but you are learning to trust your own voice. And the third action point that you can take is redefine love. This is perhaps the deepest shift. Love does not have to mean I cannot think without you. It can also mean I value you deeply and I still have space to be myself. So instead of what I should do, it slowly becomes this is what I am thinking, what do you feel about it? And that changes the relationship completely, because now the connection remains without the self disappearing. So if you look at what Ananya learned when she worked on these three shifts, she had a great level of emotional learning. At first, every time Ananya tried to think differently, you know what she felt? She felt guilty. She was worried. Will they feel hurt? Will they think I'm changing? And sometimes they did feel uncomfortable, and that's the truth. But slowly, she began learning something very important. She learned what independence means. She learned that independence is not rejection. So instead of immediately giving up her decisions, she started responding differently. Not with anger, not with rebellion, just calmly. She started saying, I still value what you say, but I also want to learn to think for myself. And maybe that's the deeper question here. Can love remain close without losing space for individuality? This is not loving less. This is not about loving less. It is about learning how to stay connected without losing yourself. And if you stayed with me till this point, you're probably someone who is deeply interested in understanding yourself and growing consciously. So if this reflection resonated with you, I invite you to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes healing begins when we finally find words for what we have been living. In the next few videos, I want to explore this more deeply, how love and identity slowly get mixed, and how relationships can either limit us or help us expand. So till we meet in the next video,